Good morning, welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. Let's talk to a man of the moment here, Alex Wilson, Reform UK's London Assembly member. And there's no doubt at all, Alex, that your leader, Nigel Farage, I mean, he was the most spoken about man at party conference this week, but it wasn't the Reform Party conference, it was the Labour Party conference. Prime Minister accusing him of being a snake oil merchant who does not like or believe in Britain, saying his policies are racist, but he as a man isn't racist and Reform voters aren't racist. What do you make of those claims?
Morning, Julia. It's great to be with you again. It's been a fascinating Labour conference in many ways. Just after the Lib Dem conference, where, again, Ed Davey, all he was talking about was Nigel. And obviously on the back of our conference, where we were celebrating Nigel and all the things that he's going to do for the country when he becomes Prime Minister. And I'm increasingly confident that it's when, not if. But I really enjoyed the Matt cartoon in yesterday's Telegraph, where it had a couple of Labour delegates leaving their conference saying, oh, next year I'll go to Reform conference, because they don't just talk about Nigel all the time. I thought that was hilarious and hit the nail on the head. We've reached this stage now where the other parties are obsessed with us. Roll back the clock a year or two and most people hadn't heard of who we were. So they say all publicity is good publicity. Well, let's say about that. I think it's great that we're setting the agenda policy-wise as well as personality-wise, and the other parties really have run out of things to say, and that's why we've seen this week Labour, all they can resort to is smears and calling us names. And look, after what happened just a couple of weeks ago in America with Charlie Kirk, all of us involved in politics should be very, very careful about the language that we use to describe our opponents. Attack people on policy, absolutely, but don't attack people for their personal motives and so on. Because I've known Nigel for a few years now, and I can see that his patriotism has always been based around belief in the rule of law, playing by the rules, integration, values. Never has it ever been about the colour of your skin or the God that you choose to worship or not worship. And it's why it's quite staggering to see not just Keir Starmer, but Shabana Mahmood, David Lammy, Bridget Phillips, and all of them this week. A concerted attack from all of them, all accusing Nigel one way or the other of being racist. The nonsense we saw from Lammy yesterday about Hitler Youth. I mean, where do they get it from? It's crazy. But that's it shows they haven't got anything positive to offer the country. That's what they have to resort to. Well, this is the thing.
The big takeaway from Labour conference is basically you've got a Prime Minister running scared from Annie Burnham and running scared from Keir Starmer. I mean, as Claire Dissel, my guest in the studio, pointed out, the Prime Minister didn't even mention his big answer to apparent. I mean, no one can quite work out why. A big answer to illegal migration is digital ID cards. Didn't even get mentioned in his speech, his big set piece speech in 55 minutes. You'd think it might have got at least one sentence in that speech, but no, it was all about Nigel Farage. That's the only thing we're talking about. Do you think this is a win for Keir Starmer, though? He has buoyed up his own party members. The conference hall loved it. Got people coming out saying, yeah, he's come out fighting. We've heard about his vision. Now, as I said a bit earlier, I don't know what his vision is, because it seems to be just, I'm not Nigel Farage. That seems to be it. And all the policies, as you say, you are leading. There's no doubt at all. You are setting the agenda. You've massively moved the Overton window for both Tories and Labour when it comes to immigration and benefits and the like. And they just decry your policies as racist and all terrible, and then basically announce something fairly similar, but just a light version of it, a diet version of it. But how successful do you think that this was for Keir Starmer personally? Because if he's shored himself up with his own party membership, even if he's alienated the rest of the country, that works for him, doesn't it?
I think he's done enough to keep his position secure for now. We'll obviously see what happens after the Scottish, Welsh and council elections next year, and I think Kemi will be in a similar position with the Conservatives if they also have another disastrous set of elections. But you saw Andy Burnham left the Labour conference before Starmer's speech. He kind of had his moment and it seems to have fizzled away. So I think, Starmer's in place for now. I don't think he'll last until the next general election, but I think he's there for the next few months at least. But if you look at the substance of what he was saying in his speech, I mean, we can talk about the racism allegations and all, but if going beyond that, you look at he was trying to give the impression, or I think the thing that sort of struck me, he was talking about trying to change the way that we create wealth as a country. But if you look at the actions of this Labour government, you can see that the rhetoric is so far away from what's actually happening as a consequence of Rachel Reeves' first budget, where she put up taxes, is now making it more and more difficult and unviable to employ people and for businesses to grow. That's not going to change the way we create wealth. And the examples that Starmer gave in his speech yesterday, talking about from clean energy to creative arts, well, that's not the way to build mass employment and a sustainable economy. To grow the economy, to get people in work and to stop the rising tide of unemployment, which is growing month on month now and has done since that first budget, we need to grow stuff. We need to drill for stuff, have cheap energy. We need to manufacture stuff. That's the basis of a thriving, growing, successful economy.
And all of their talking about becoming a world AI leader. Well, AI requires huge amounts of energy, and it has to be cheap. By the way, I mean, this is the thing. But
you're not going to do that with wind farms.
What did you make though of Keir Starmer talking about how he wanted to change how international law is interpreted? He said in interviews since, to stop unsuccessful asylum seekers blocking their deportation. So not leaving the ECHR, not reforming it, but changing how human rights legislation effectively is interpreted by judges in our tribunals and in our courts.
Well, if you look at the way that judges are interpreting those rules, and asylum judges and all those kind of things, you're not going to change that by decreeing from number 10. I guess in some ways, welcome an acknowledgement that the system isn't working. But fundamentally, if we're going to change the system, we have to change the laws that are being interpreted, and that means withdrawing from the ECHR. It means repealing the Human Rights Act, putting British citizens first, and you're not going to do that just by a few words from a conference speech that aren't going to be followed up by those judges that are in place and are making those decisions on a daily or weekly basis. And
what do you make also of Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, apparently considering a plan to scrap the two-child benefit cap? That's a £3.5 billion cost. It's about £3,500 extra a year per child for a family that is able to get that extra money, more than 2 children. Your party, for some bizarre reason, against, by the way, majority of voter opinion, you also support scrapping that cap. So would you welcome that?
Yeah, I know you and I have clashed on this one before, and
well, you've been wrong about it, and I've been right about it.
Well, I couldn't possibly comment, but anything that costs money needs to be funded by saving money elsewhere, and the welfare budget is bloated. There needs to be things looked at it to try and trim that back. We saw the Labour government, though, they tried just to reduce the increase in the welfare budget through the PIP, and they couldn't manage to get that through their parliamentary party. So anything that Labour try and put forward to make savings, I really think they'll struggle to get it through. Well, it's not going to be a saving, it's an extra cost. Why does Reform, though, support a policy of paying people who don't work enough to support the children they've got and asking other people who already go out to work, who probably would love to have more children but can't afford it because they're paying so much tax, to pay more tax to pay for other people who can't afford to pay for the kids they've already got? Why would you think that was a fair policy? Because one of the 3 fundamental principles that guide our party is family. So family, community and country. Those are the values that Nigel espouses. Who do you want to have more kids? What about the hard-working families who can only afford to have 1 kid because they can't afford to buy a home because they have to has a second child? What about those families? They can't afford because they're paying so much tax and house prices are so high and the cost of living is so high. If they could have lower taxes and we weren't having a booming welfare state paying for feckless people who can't look after their own kids, wouldn't they be able to then have another kid? What about them? Yeah, we want to do that by growing the economy, by cutting taxes, by making energy costs cheaper. Well, no, but you're not cutting taxes if you're adding an extra £3.5 billion to the bill by paying people who don't work enough to support their own kids. Do you think that those kids are going to be a benefit to society, realistically? I think having stable families that can grow is a good thing. Well, and yes, they're not stable families, are they? Their parents can't support them. We want to get people back into work, and fundamentally it's about growing the economy. That's what Labour are failing at doing. That's why their tax hikes are so bad. I know you don't agree with this policy. Why don't you just say it? That's why I'm absolutely dreading what Rachel Reeves will come up in the next budget. You don't agree with this policy, do you? Her first one was a disaster. Her second one's probably going to be even worse. It's going to be our last. I think we know that. But you don't agree with this policy. I can tell you don't. Alex Wilson, Reform UK Assembly member, thank you very much for joining us. Claire Pearsall.
Well, it was a good effort. Do you know what? He's saying a lot of words there.
I know they've only got 5 MPs. They've got a lot of good... I don't like to use the word performer because it implies it's a performance for someone as opposed to people who can actually communicate and support their party policies.
But somebody that can actually explain and have a conversation with you. And there are some really good people. And Alex is one of those. But he doesn't believe it. He can't believe it.
No one sane believes in that policy. I'm just paying a load of people who can't support their kids to have more kids.